All right. So before we kick off today's casual, I mean, you guys are going to know this is not going to be hard at all. In fact, if you can read the pattern, I don't think it's hard, but I wanted to showcase this pattern a little bit because especially as we hit the sort of the Advent or gift season, this is one of those patterns that I think sometimes gets overlooked because it's not for sale. And it's also like way early in my design career. And I just wanted to highlight it a little bit and show you how quickly you can finish gift sweaters or like to put on little packages or ornaments or whatever. But before we go into that, I wanted to quickly ask if anyone had some questions about the sprouts. Either what's happening with them in terms of release or in terms of you're having a problem. That seems awesome. Okay. I've been enjoying seeing people instantly start to modify the sprouts. That just makes me very happy. They are very quick because they're worsted weight. So even Droplet here, who has not released yet, really is not a lot of knitting. And I think Bean especially is fast because Bean has almost no shaping. It's like a bit here and a bit here, and then you just do some I-cord and some other bits. I don't know. They're so Moorish for me, at least. You got a problem with, okay, I see that, Manon, that you sent me a direct message. Can you DM me on Ravelry about that? And I'll just fix it for you real quick. But if you DM me, then I've got your username and it's really easy for me to like short circuit not having to ask you for info. So we'll make sure that happens. Okay. Other than Manon's code problem that I will sort out on Ravelry, I think it sounds like you guys don't have questions, and so we're just going to launch right in. So the idea behind the, oh, let me do the spotlight thing. Spotlight, and then add spotlight. Hopefully everyone's seeing two versions of me. Okay. You know what? I'm going to remove my main spotlight and then put it back on so my hands are on top. That should be the... All right, so for me now, my hands are on top, myself is on the bottom. Hopefully it's the same for you, although it seems like whether you're on a computer or a phone or a tablet, it changes every time anyways. So I've done what I can on my end. Everyone else, good luck. All right, so the wee sweater here was designed because I was knitting a lot of little sweaters and I wanted them to be faster. In particular, the sleeves were taking up a lot of time. It just seemed like putting the sleeves aside, then picking them up, working on them, just having to have like, I don't know, like 10 stitches on the needles. It's more than I wanted to do for I-cord. And at that point, I wasn't as intrepid with I-cord. Maybe I would do it just like a 10-stitch I-cord now, but I wasn't at the time. And I was coaching a soccer team or two, and I decided that I was going to make little soccer jerseys for everyone on the team, and then do like their number on the front, and then on the back I did BU because it was Brandon University. And so that became a tradition. As long as my husband and I were the coaches, I would give them these every year and at the end of the season, I think, or was it Christmas? Doesn't matter. But I really wanted a way to like not have to finish the sleeves separately, no putting the stitches aside. I tried a bunch of different things, and in the end, the weird little like back and forth wiggle I did on the ribbing, and then there's like a little maneuver to lock it down. It was just the best way I could get it. By the end, I could do one of these in 45 minutes. Because I pretty much memorized the pattern and just go. So the first thing we're gonna do is, whoa, where's my pattern? There we go. First thing we're gonna do is just cast on 18 stitches. Using whatever yarn and whatever needles make sense for you. You can go up needle sizes compared to gnomes. Don't think that they have like, we're not stuffing these, so you can be more relaxed going, like the tight gauge isn't as important. I am going to do long tail, and the pattern asks for long tail, but I don't think it's actually essential in this one. When I wouldn't actually specify that nowadays. But for those of you doing long tail, I just want to reiterate that the reason your long tail is too tight, when it is too tight, is this step right here when you're tightening it. If there isn't space between the stitches, there can't be any stretch. It's this bottom bit here, the space here, that determines the size of your stitch and the stretchiness of it. So some people cast on larger needles, and all that does is it makes this loop taller, but it doesn't actually make, unless you're like not tightening as much, it doesn't actually make the distance any different. So there's actually some really interesting things online if you want to like see what people have done with the different methods of casting on long tail that people say makes it looser, and showing you that it actually it doesn't. It's really graphic. Now, because of the way this works, my phone is blocking my I actually have to, I look at the screen while I knit. This is so weird because the phone is between my hands and my face. So just give me a sec to count over here. All right, I'm at 17 and my long tail is way too long, so I'm just going to cut it off for myself. Woo. I'm going to join this to knit in the round, and then we're going to work knit one through the back loop, purl one, and I've got it on 4 needles in the pattern, and I'm going to be honest, I do 3 needles until I have to change for the raglan part. So just get this on 3 needles, or however many you're doing. If you're doing magic loop, you're fine. If you're doing magic loop, you will need stitch markers or a better mental track of how many stitches are in each section once we get to the raglan. All right. Pro tip when making sure that you're not twisting your cast on, take a moment when you got this just to do like a trace and just feel along. And as long as you don't feel or see that line of like the bottoms of the cast on, as long as that doesn't twist around, you haven't twisted your stitches. So as long as you can sort of see them, or all of them are facing inside, that's another way to tell that you have not twisted your cast on. All right, so this first bit, I'm not gonna, I mean, I have to do something to fill the silence while we get to the sleeve part, but we will just see. Yep.
You said instead of 4 needles, you use 3, but if I'm on 4 needles, I'm getting extra stitches because I'm knitting front and back on both, on all 4.
Okay, so we're not knitting front and back yet. We're just doing the ribbing.
Okay, well, I'm past that, so that's why I'm asking.
So
switch it. Maybe I should switch it to 3.
Well, once we're knitting on, like once we're doing the increases, I will be on 4.
Oh, okay.
As well. Oh gosh, I'm not doing this right. I'm not doing twisted ribbing. Hang on a sec. Yeah, the reason, so this pattern was written before I decided that I was going to make sure that my patterns were needle agnostic. And that is the reason why I actually am specific to how many needles I want people to be on, because that way I didn't have to say like 4 stitches per section. I would just say like knit to end of needle rather than knit to end of section. That was definitely something that I changed pretty quickly as I was designing, but I hadn't done that yet, and I haven't actually gone back and fixed this pattern to reflect that. So there we go. There we are. All right. So the reason I went with twisted, or I guess half twisted rib, was that with just a few rounds of ribbing, to kind of keep things from rolling and also to imply neckline. It seemed like a regular, gosh, it seemed like a regular ribbing just wasn't working for me. What did I do here? Well, that's just a problem. Give me a sec here, guys. Okay, I'm gonna have to start again. Give me a minute. I will do this as fast as I can. And I'm gonna move the camera because it is so close to my needles that I can barely work without stabbing my needles into the blanket that I've got here below me as my backdrop. And that's really hampering me. The Wee sweater is not on Ravelry. It's a free pattern that is on my website. So behind the free pattern library password protected site. I think, I'm not sure if there's actually an entry. Yeah, there is. Well, let me think about this. It should have an entry on Ravelry because Ravelry is a database, but the pattern itself is not available on Ravelry for now, but that will probably change this year. I'm working on getting a new website and changing how I deliver those free patterns, and I haven't yet quite figured out how I'm going to do that. One thing to note is that the password on the free pattern library is happy knitting, all one word, all lowercase. People have been having problems downloading the patterns sometimes, no matter what. Sometimes they just have to switch browsers and then they can download, and sometimes there's nothing and they can do, and I just end up sending them a PDF. And that's part of why I want to figure out a better way to do this. And I'm working with the website developer to figure out exactly how the free patterns are going to happen. So because I'm behind schedule, I will not do as many rounds of ribbing as are called for in the pattern here, but I will do at least a little bit to get us set off and not rolling. Just a reminder to everybody to mute yourselves. Sometimes we're getting some background noise that's coming through. I'm not sure if it's husbands or dogs or children, but there is just a little bit coming through. So if everyone could remember that if you're not asking a question, muting yourself is really great. If you do need to ask a question, though, just unmute. There's no harm in that. Okay, it is on Ravelry, but you get linked to Sarah's page. We got the PDF in the mail from Patreon, though. Yeah, so you should have access to the pattern. If you go to the Patreon page, the PDF is loaded on the not the post I did at 11 today to remind you about this, but the one earlier this week. That was sort of the first announcement of it. There should be an attachment. The post with the picture. Okay, you found it, Kim. That's awesome. Let me just see here. A crop top sweater. Yeah, it's gonna be, I should have just done like a rolled brim is what I should have done. I'm just gonna do 2 rounds of ribbing and then 1 round plain, and that'll speed us along so we're not waiting for me. I debated how much of this I should have prepped versus, oh gosh, my hands aren't anywhere near where they need to be. I debated how much of this I needed to have prepped versus could do while chatting generally to you guys, and clearly my ability to chat and work this particular pattern have not shown up to be stellar so far. All right, so there's a little bit of ribbing, and then there's 1 round plain just to kind of get us away from that. And then it's at that point that I would be switching to 4 needles or putting in stitch markers if I was going to be magic looping this. I've said before, though, that magic loop is actually really difficult to demonstrate with the overhead camera. And the background is just the longer cords looping around tend to hit the phone and then make the whole thing bounce a bit, and then everyone gets nauseous. So I tend to do as much teaching as I can with DPNs just to work the environment situation here. When we arrange the stitches, or if you already have, as the pattern outlines, we've basically got 6 stitches are the front and back, and then 3 stitches for each sleeve. So I'm just going to double check right now how I'm going to do mine. So we've got, all right, so I'm going to slide 4 off here. One thing I will note is when you're slipping stitches, always try to overlap your needle tips like I'm doing here, so that you can just push them right off from one to the other and you don't have to worry about dropping them. And then you're not having to slip them singly either. It doesn't have to be like when you're doing an SSK when it's like single slip, single slip. You can just kind of shove them all over. Also, you don't want to slip stitches knitwise in case the SSK reference made you feel like you should be doing that. Unless otherwise told, always slip purlwise. All right. So this is a place where if you wanted to substitute the modified knit front and back that I've been using in some of my patterns lately, you could. So if you wanted to do that, I'll just remind you. So a typical knit front and back goes into the front of the loop. Don't take your stitch off the needle, go back into the back of the loop, grab a second loop and pull it off. And that's going to give you a little, almost like a little purl stitch look on that one. But if you want to do the modified stitch knit front and back, you just go into the front of the loop, go around to the back identically, but rather than grabbing an extra loop, you just slide it right off. I haven't double checked that you can do that on here. I should be able to actually, because we have the rest row between. The knit front and back modified is a little tricky if you want to start stacking your increases on top of each other, because you've just slipped the stitch rather than grabbing that new loop. If you need to stack right on top of that, you can't do that, but you could do it if you had done a regular knit front and back. And so if you've ever seen where in some of my patterns, sometimes I do both knit front and backs and the modified knit front and back, sometimes it's just me trying to manage that part of it, or it's me trying to simplify maybe the first round of something with the regular knit front and back. Sometimes there's a reason that I've done it. And I will be honest, I often still do the regular knit front and back on gnome hats and gnome bodies, because I can read that stitch so well. I know so easily if I like which row was the increase row. And then if I'm doing like 1 increase row and 3 rows plain, I can see that so clearly with that little bump from the regular knit front and back, that honestly, to get the ease of not having to like look at my knitting or use a row counter, I will in fact just use the bumpier increase just for that reason. Like that's 100% what I'm doing when I'm doing that. So it's a little odd, but it's just, I don't know. And I don't mind the visible increase very much. But it's definitely something that if you do mind, the modified one is a nice alternative. We'll see if I've actually tried it out here. I probably shouldn't have tried it out here. I should probably just switch right back to the regular one, because if it doesn't work and I have to cast on again, which I'm not going to do, don't worry. We don't have time to be watching me reknit this over and over again. So the pattern has us doing 1 increase round where we're increasing 2 stitches per section at the end of each section. So we increase, work to the last stitch, increase 4 times around. And we are doing that. What am I doing here? just a little bit. This is a basic raglan sweater. So once you've done this, you've basically done half of what you need to know to knit a big raglan sweater for yourself, top down. Obviously the arms will be worked quite differently. All right, let me just check something here if I can. Used to be that it was really easy for me to mute everybody on that. That's the chat. Let's see if I go to participants. There we go. There's my mute all button. Okay, there we go. So I'm on another increase row, and I will go back to doing the knit front and back average so that we're not guessing if it's going to work. All right, how many times are we going to do this? We're going to do it 3 times total. Jen is writing here in chat that, oh, why won't that go all the way down for me? The knit front and back is interesting in color work because it's more seamless in color work. And the modified knit front and back brings a slip of the old round up into the old color up into the current one. Yeah, anytime you slip, you are bringing the old round up. And if it's an old color up, that's a bit of a problem. It's also interesting in terms of whether you do like the make one increase. That's an interesting one. The make one increase is like the E-loop cast on, whereas like the make one left or make one right actually pulls up the running thread, and that can also sometimes change how colors play in a pattern, and you can use it to effect, or it can mess with your effect. The main thing to be watching for when you are doing, when you're playing around with increases compared to what a designer has put in, is that you want to make sure that if the designer's way to increase uses a stitch and yours won't, so like the knit front and back uses a stitch to make that stitch. So I might say something like knit 8, knit front and back. So that's actually 9 stitches that are increasing to 10. Whereas if I said knit 8, make one left, that's just 8 stitches increasing to 9. And so some increases use a stitch and some don't. And knowing which one the designer used and which one you're using can be important for getting your stitch counts right for your increase in the right place. It's often totally fine to be swapping around, but you do need to know that you might be playing with your stitch count a bit. The other thing to be thinking about when you're modifying increases is some of them are much more flexible than others, and some of them are quite rigid. And so it's important to also be thinking about if you're changing the stretchiness of a section. It's possible if you were to, like, you can do this kind of sweater with, rather than the knit front and back, you could do knit 1 yarn over, right? You could just add yarn overs as your increase. Yarn overs are a very stretchy increase. And if this was a raglan sweater that I was wearing, I wouldn't want the raglan line to be very stretchy, because I want my yoke to have as much strength as I can. And if I'm doing a seamless sweater, I'm already giving up a lot of structure in the sweater itself by not having seams. So if I'm going to change what the designer was doing in terms of a flexible versus inflexible increase, that's also just something to think about. All right, I'm on another increase row. This might be my last one, but we'll see. I'm trying to make up for my starting over. If you are not as fast as me, don't worry about it, because we have this as a recording. You guys are gonna be able to, like, just when I get to the point where we're doing the sleeve part, if you're not with me, just sort of put your needles down, watch what's going on, and come back to it with a recording, or just once you've seen me do it. It should be pretty straightforward, especially as there are some pictures in the pattern. Although looking at them, you know, I did really well considering like I was on like an old iPhone and didn't have a light box and had access to none of the editing software that I have now for photos. So I'm not actually sure how I got that background that white. That's pretty impressive. I wonder what I did. Manon is writing, if you do a yarn over, you can knit them through the back loop in the next round. Yeah, and that does tighten them up a bit. It will not be as rigid, or rigid is not the right word, but it will be still be more flexible than, let's say, a make one or a knit front and back. But it does at least tighten up those yarn overs and take some of the stretch out. All right, let me just double check here. Well, that stitch count is off, so let me just think about things here. Okay, I am one set of increases short. So I will go once around again, one plain, one fancy. This is a good time for people to ask questions if they have them. Ooh. All right. Oh, great news. I figured out how on YouTube to, like I've always added timestamps to my tutorials, but I've actually figured out how to turn on chapters. So when I'm working on going back and adding them, but when you hover with your mouse or when you tap the video on an iPhone, the red line that indicates like the playback should now be broken up into chunks with a little label saying what section they are. I finally figured out how to do that. It is like the simplest thing ever, and I can't believe I didn't know it. I thought it was like some thing you had to unlock with a large enough subscriber count or something, because it seemed like nothing was making sense to me, and because no one I knew was doing it, so we were all like, oh, it's this magical mystical thing, and it's literally just you have to start your timestamps with the very first stamp has to be 00:00, and then you got to give it a name of some kind, like intro. And if you just start your timestamps with that, that's it. That's all you need. You're gonna have chapters in your playback bar. Wild. The other thing I learned is how to turn on closed captioning. So I am at the same time I'm going back and making sure that the chapters are turned on. I'm going back and adding. I don't know why I'm adding an extra syllable to that. I am adding the closed captioning as well, so that it is easier to sort of like watch a tutorial with the sound off. Let's say you're knitting a gnome and you're watching some TV, but it gets to a point where you need to like go back and check how a technique works. Well, you can just turn on the closed captioning and have the video in your lap on your phone while whatever video is playing on your main screen. Let's see. Yeah, Kim, like having the ability for it to be available also as an accessibility thing is really important to me. I'm so glad that they added captioning to It's really easy to caption my Instagram stories now. When I do videos, that they've turned on and made easy, and I've been figuring out in a bunch of places. One thing I need to figure out is how to do low vision accessible or e-reader accessible patterns. And that every time I look into that at all is like an absolutely baffling thing. Like there's so much written that I need like the baby beginner guide to like hold my hand and be like, it's okay. There's lots of ways to get this really, really right, but here's like a good enough way to start. And I don't know where that is. So if anyone knows how to do like the and particularly with Apple products, because I would be using Word. Nope, not Word. What do we have? We have Pages. That's something I would love to have in my pattern. But like I said, I've looked into it a few times, and every time I like start to hyperventilate because it looks like there are so many opinions about what counts as low vision or e-reader accessible. And it's just, it's like I said, it's important to me, but also so overwhelming. And I'm sure there's a resource out there. It's like these 7 steps, or at least I hope there is. So I keep every now and then I do a Google search to see if there is such a thing, and I'm still not finding it. We'll see. I will say that the closed captioning is automatically generated. It is not something I go in and double check is right. And we all know that computers don't always speak knitting. So the closed captioning can get a little janky when it comes to like writing out what I'm actually saying, but it's a lot better than it is otherwise. And I really appreciate it when other people do that. Just because it does make such a difference to like the number of times I can watch. Like if it's your Instagram story and there aren't closed captionings, the odds that I will just like be like, we're done. I'm not turning the sound up for you. Like I'll turn it up for my kids. I'll turn it up for a couple of cousins and maybe 1 or 2 content creators. But if I'm in stories, I'm mostly looking for pretty pictures of knitting or a really hilarious meme. I don't want to be I don't want to turn the sound on. Like that is asking so much of me. So I am on the last round. I have done my final increase. I have not double checked to make sure that my stitch count is correct. I think 1 sleeve is an even number instead of an odd number. I managed to skip an increase or something, but we're going to be fine because we can fudge anything. Honestly, just fudge it. So this is what I've got right now. I've got my little neckline. I've got my 4-point rectangle with my little increases, more visible because I went back to those knit front and backs, which gives me the little sort of pearl bar almost looking thing. And before we start the next step, I'm going to take a sip of water, make sure to pull up my instructions, and then we'll get started. I will also, when I post this video, make sure to post where this section starts so that if you want to skip ahead to this, it's going to be real obvious. All right, make sure my pattern's front and center. So the first needle, we're just going to knit across because the first section is the front of the sweater. So we don't need to do anything to that. And you guys are all good at that. You're experts at working a section. And the second needle is where the magic comes in, as it were. And we work on the second section exclusively until we bind the stitches off. So I am now finished the front, and now I'm going to knit 1, purl 1 across. It should be an uneven number of stitches. and I should be ending with a knit one. If I end with a purl one, nobody's going to know. Like nobody's going to look at this armpit of this sweater, so don't worry about it. You could do it through the back loop, but over the years, I found that if I did the collar and the hem with regular ribbing, it looked puffy and weirdly oversized, and I didn't want to have to change needle sizes for this speedy project. But it seemed like I didn't need to do the twisted ribbing on the sleeve to get the sleeve to behave, which is interesting to me. So I've knit ribbing across, and now I'm going to turn my work, and I am going to purl one, knit one across. So like I said, we're just going to hang out here on section 2. If you're working on double pointed needles, just take the time to get your needles like so they're not over under in a way that makes this awkward. So I'm going to purl one, knit one across. And it could be that the switch from flat knitting to knitting in the round makes enough of a difference in my ribbing that's why I'm not having to do the knit one through the back loop. What is going on here? Hang on a sec. And it's possible that that's what's going on for me, and that if you keep working this, you may find that you want to do this one as a half twisted rib. Just a note, if you do, it would be knitting on this second pass, you would be knitting regularly and purling through the back loop so that you're working the same stitches twisted. Okay, so I have worked my way across a second pass of ribbing here. Once on the front side, the right side of the work, once on the wrong side of the work. Now I'm not going to turn my work, and I'm going to make sure that my yarn is towards me. So it's laying across the wrong side of the work, and I'm going to drop it. Now I'm going to use the right needle tip, and I'm going to pick up this purl bump here. All right, let me pull this nice and close up. So I've got this very first stitch, and I want to pick this purl bump up, and I want to pick it up from the top, but that's really awkward to do. So what I like to do is to, hang on, I like to go in from the bottom and kind of pull it up. And then once it's got kind of nice and loose there, now I can come through from the top. So it's actually working out really well because my color has changed, but you can see I've got sort of the purple stitches here, and then this lifted part of the stitch from the front is now like an extra stitch there. So now we turn our work again. So it looks kind of weird here because you've got kind of like half a stitch coming out of it this way and a stitch coming this way, and they both feel like they're from the same stitch, and that's because they are. And now I need to scroll down on my pattern, boop, 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 make sure that I'm saying what my pattern says. All right, so now we need to grab the yarn again, however you like to knit, and we are going to knit these two stitches together. And what this does is it locks the side of the sleeve down to the how can I explain this? Oh, I'm really worried that this is doing a screen record again, and my pattern's been over it a little bit. Oh gosh, I hope it was not the case. All right, let me just quickly go back and redo that step just in case. I don't think it was covering it on my screen, but just in case, as we did that, we had that whole fiasco where I didn't have it. I didn't understand that it was screen recording. Okay, so we've got our knit one, purl one, ribbing becomes our purl one, knit one, ribbing across. Now we need to lift up this purl bump, but from the top. It's awkward to do from the top. So if you just kind of pull it up and loosen it, and then come from the top. Now that we have that, let's flip it around. And we now have this sort of single stitch has become two stitches, one on each needle. Now we can pick up the yarn again, and we're going to just knit these two together. And by doing this pick up and then knitting them together, it's going to kind of lock the sleeve down to the body in a nice way. And now I still need to see my pattern though.
I haven't gotten there yet, and I'm doing magic loop. When you're turning, it's all the same theory.
Yeah, so what you'll be doing is you'll be working section 2 from the back. So you will need to, let me think this through. You'll need to kind of switch which needle you're knitting on versus knitting off. So you may need to like rearrange things. I will, when we get to sleeve 2, I'll actually do I'll do it on this needle and we'll make it make sense. So let me just keep going with the double pointed needle version. And we are now just going to bind off. All right, so I'm gonna bind off in pattern, which means I'm gonna purl this one, then I'm gonna hop this one up and over, just a traditional bind off. This doesn't need to actually be in, or there doesn't need a loose bind off. There is no miniature person who's going to curse us for having a too tight bind off on this sleeve. So we can just do a nice standard bind off or whatever one you want. I do think it makes a big difference if you bind off in pattern. It will add what looks like a third row of ribbing. It'll add that third purl in particular is what it's going to do. All right. All right, and once you've got all the stitches in that section used up, like you still need to use one more from the next section because I still need to bind off this stitch here, the very last stitch, just to make that very clear. There is sometimes some confusion in people's minds about what all needs to be bound off sometimes. So I'm just being very, very explicit here that we were going to need to use one stitch from what is, let's say the back. So I will knit one from there and pull that in. Now, you may notice that that is kind of loose and floppy. So you can knit that one through the back loop before lifting that stitch up and over, and that'll just tighten that up. This little underarm section does get a little gappy sometimes, and that's just a quick tip for that. All right, so now before I go on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to rearrange my stitches onto one needle from the back and this sleeve, and then we can treat that like a magic loop a little bit. It won't be perfect, but it'll at least give me a bit more of a sense of what would be going on. All right. Okay, so the same as the front, we just knit across the back. The first one is already worked as part of our last little bit of the bind off. So just gonna knit, knit, knit. And I don't have a stitch marker in place showing me where that last bit is. So let me just double check. Yeah, so that's the last one of my back. So let's quickly grab a stitch marker. I already had them out. Okay. Good job, Sarah. Okay. That way it'll look a little bit more like what you guys have on for Magic Loop. Okay. So I've gotten to the end of section 3. That's the back. Now I'm going to work section 4, which is the sleeve. And we're just going to knit one through the back loop, purl one across. Same as the first sleeve. Like I said, I experimented with a lot of different ways to try to get the sleeve looking like a sleeve without me having to put any stitches on scrap yarn or do anything. And just this little bit of back and forth across the one section made a big difference. All right, so let's say I've got my magic loop. So I've gotten to the end of this. So then I'm going to have to turn and work back. So yeah, what would have to happen in order for that to happen is I would have to pull this front, what is now the sort of the front needle. I'm working on the back needle, but I'm going to have to pull this one out and flip the cord around so that I can purl one, knit one back across. Does that make sense for you Magic Loop people? And who had the question originally? I'm getting a yes in the chat. The people that I can see faces of, I think, are all DPN users, and so they're just like, whatever, Sarah, keep going. But if you ask this question, can you confirm that that was useful?
I have to get to the part again. I think I messed up on the don't turn or turn. The first turn, I didn't turn. So
Okay.
I've stopped.
Okay. So basically you'll work ribbing as usual across, then you will turn, and now you will need to rearrange your needles so that you can use the back needle as your working needle, and the front needle will actually become that. So let's pretend
Or
this
I could use a double point needle with the,
yeah.
yeah.
Or even like a cable needle if it's the right size, like anything. So I'm going to just quickly work across this with my DPN. So purl one across. The next row is the only other row this sweater needs any comment about. And then it's just basically knitting in the round. All right, so I've gotten to the end of the second row, and this is where we would have to pick up from the other side. So it's this little bit here where I need to pick that up. So I have to go, if I'm using magic loop, I will have to kind of like cross the stitch marker side, and I will grab this purl bump from the top. Then I will turn my work again. Whoosh. We can actually get rid of that stitch marker because we don't need to section the front and back from the sleeves anymore. That division doesn't exist because we're binding off the sleeve pretty much immediately. Oh wait, what I did not do when I did that, let's go back. I will undo that. The working yarn needs to be on the wrong side before you do that. So grab that purl bump. Now I flip it. And now I work that fresh stitch, which is so conveniently blue, together with the purple that was the worked stitch. I will just knit those two together and lock that side of the sleeve down a little bit to the body. Then I will bind off across the sleeve. So because I don't have the stitch marker there, that would be one reason just to keep it for a little bit. But this stitch onwards is the back. So I'm just going to bind off, starting here. Once you start binding off, it should be very clear what's going on. The other thing to remember is that if you get this a little wonky or whatever, and your sweater is a bit gapey at the underarm, when you sew in your end from the bottom and from the cast on, just slide those up inside or down inside your sweater to where you're having the problem, and just use, like, flip the sweater inside out, kind of run the yarn down along the stitches. So just kind of like splitting the plies a little bit on the reverse stockinette side, and just use your ends to make those gaps go away. If this is an ornament or something like that, it doesn't need to be too precious. All right, so I've got all but that last one fixed. So I'm going to put it on another needle here so that I have front and back stitches are on 2 at the moment. Bind off this last one onto the front. The sleeves at this point are done. So if you were working a real raglan sweater, part of this next round would involve casting on stitches under the underarm so that it actually fits a human, but we're not trying to fit a human. So I'm just going to work across the front row. And then I'm going to rearrange things so that they are on 3. The working stitches are on 3 needles. So the way I do that when I'm working this row is I knit half the stitches onto a DPN, then pick up a new DPN. And then I keep working. So the side with 2 DPNs will be my front, and the side with 1 will be my back. But if you knit an extra half round or whatever, it doesn't really matter. So We're going to knit 13, and now this one we're going to knit through the back loop. It can get a little gappy. So if we knit this last stitch on the front through the back loop, it just tidies up a little bit. And then on the back, we do the same thing. We knit across, and then we knit the last one through the back loop. If on the subsequent row you find still a little bit of the stitch looking a little distorted, just knit that through the back loop also, if you want, or like I said, just wait till you've got to the end and then use your tail to tidy it up. Mine would be a little tricky because mine is a color changing yarn, and I'm pretty sure this green yarn would show up if I tried to sew up a gap in a purple armpit, but it also shouldn't be too visible. If it's another way to fix stitches that are gappy that you don't like is to go back with your needle tip after it's all done and just tug the extra tension out of that stitch. I'll show you in a minute. So this is my last one on the back. So I'm just going to knit it through the back loop. Then I'm going to join right here. It's not quite joined to knit in the round because I've got that sleeve. But if I knit the next round, this will now be all just working in the round. So that's what I'll do. I'll just quickly knit across one needle, and then I will show you what I mean about tugging extra tension out as being another way to deal with this problem. And I'll do that on the sample, the golden one that is in the picture I used for a Patreon announcement. All right, so then the rest of the pattern is just like knit 9 more rounds, and then do some ribbing for the bottom and bind off. So it's quite simple. You're just doing 2 rows of ribbing, and then doing a little bit of a pickup on the one side to just get that to anchor down. Otherwise, that one side of the sleeve really wants to just kind of like perk up. But by picking up that purl bump and then knitting them together, that side of the sleeve just kind of holds down and is curved rather than just kind of lifting up and flaring. So like I said, if you get a bit of gapping here that you don't love, what you can do is just grab your needle tip and tug on it. So pull this one, and just pull it across the body, leaving each stitch just a little bit bigger than it was. But that will just slowly redistribute the extra yarn across all the stitches rather than having it sort of like all stored in one big floppy stitch. So it sometimes takes a little bit of extra care, but just by tugging and tugging, you can do a lot. You can do this on your, you can do this on like anything small and like a toy, but do it on your sweaters, do it on your lace shawls too. If you've blocked it out and you're still not happy, go in and redistribute the tension. That's all that the problem is it's a problem of extra yarn in one place. And if you can go and just gently redistribute it across a lot of stitches, it just takes that problem and makes it disappear. So this is what the sleeve will look like as knit, without all the colors distracting us, and with sort of more fabric underneath to show you what I'm talking about. But like I said, this sleeve looks pretty good with the standard ribbing, whereas it seems to me, for my style of knitting at least, that the neckline and then down here the hemline needs the twisted rib. Otherwise this gets just loose and kind of flabby, weird stitches. Just double checking in chat that we're good. Good. I'm glad that you're just popping in, Kim, and you can use it later. Yeah, like I said, it usually takes me a day or two because YouTube's a little weird. I have to like condense files and then you have to upload them and process them a little bit. Also, this is my weekend. If this was weekday, I'd be like so on top of this, but I'm trying to do better at having boundaries between work life and and the rest of my life, and I'm getting better. You know, frankly, the reason that it was such a thing is I didn't expect the gnomes to be popular, and for a long time I kept thinking, well, they're gonna be unpopular like tomorrow, so I have to say yes to every opportunity. And the problem is they've been sustainably popular. I have had sustainably a lot of offers, and I have to say no to some things. It's not going to be a flash in the pan, even if it's like I don't know, going to be a flash in a pot? Is a pot bigger? Like, even if it's going to be like 5 years of interest and then it dies off, if I kept going the way I have been, it's an unsustainable 5 years. So I just need to figure things out. So for a long time, I was sure the bubble was going to pop like tomorrow, every time. And I've just accepted that it works, and that you guys like me. And that, like, no matter what I design, whether it's a gnome or a sprout or a hat, there will be somebody who will pay me to do that and keep doing what I'm doing. So I don't need to work myself to bits. Like, it was just this fear, right? And so I've realized, like, it's going to be okay. There is enough. Like, it's not going to pop. And that's just taking some time, because I have still said yes to some things originally, you know, that I'm still like percolating through the calendar. So my weekend is, I'm trying to keep weekendy, so I don't always process for YouTube as soon as absolutely possible. Any last questions? You guys can all unmute if you want, and I will stop highlighting me.
Thank you. This was great.
That's good. There we go.
Sarah, I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you have any recommendations if you wanted to make it a long sleeve, like a winter style sweater? I mean, would you be able to do that with this pattern, or would that just not work?
Yeah. So what you do is, don't worry about any of the ribbing instructions. Like, ignore that completely. You would knit across. What's better for me to do? Is it better to show me or the sweater? I'm going to highlight the sweater. Here we go. Spotlight. Okay. So you would still knit across the front, then slide all the sleeve stitches onto spare yarn.
Okay.
Knit across the back, slide the second sleeve onto spare yarn, and then work the body. Once you are done the body, come back, put one sleeve on needles, and then pick up a stitch or two from the body on the first round, and then decrease them away instantly. You're just doing that to keep it from being gapey. So pick up 1 or 2 stitches right in here, and then decrease them away when you get back to them. So maybe like knit around, do a knit 2 together, and then an SSK, or the opposite, whatever it is. And then just work these in the round. They will not need to be as long as you think they do. It is really weird. Sleeve anatomy for miniature sweaters is not the same as for people. For people, we often, like, our arms are really long, but like miniature sleeves look weird if they're too long. So just kind of play around with that a little bit. But that's all you would need to change, is the willingness to knit 11 stitches in the round.
Okay.
Which,
I think that they would just be so cute on a Christmas tree if they were like the, you know.
yeah.
More
I
like
agree. And that's
winter.
what, like, originally that's what I was knitting. And I eventually got to the point where this conveys a sweater enough for me personally.
Well, and it looks more like a soccer jersey, so
It definitely does. So what I'll do
especially
too
with
is
the numbers on
I'll
it.
like embroider snowflakes or something on this, and then that's like, it's enough that it's not a t-shirt anymore in my brain. But that's also me. I do know, like, the ones with the sleeves they're just amazing. I agree.
I saw, because I was looking on Ravelry last night, I saw a couple of them that had the longer sleeves, and I have never knit a human sweater, so
Oh.
I have no idea. So
Yeah. So, like, just to make it clear, like on a normal human sweater, once you took the sleeves onto spare yarn, what you would actually do is you would cast on, let's say, 6 stitches using like the backwards E-loop or like the knitted cast on or something, and then you would keep going. And then when you put the sleeves back on your needles, you would then pick up the same number across. So if you cast on 6, you would like pick up 6. There's some financing, or not financing, there's some finessing to do in there to like keep it from being gapey, but that's the basic principle, is you would add more stitches here across the gap. But that's really it. Like, you've done a raglan yoke.
wow. Well, maybe one of these days I'll get brave.
Yeah. The flax pattern by Tin Can Knits is a free pattern that uses this style of sorry, I just made myself small, right?
No, you're
I did
big
click
again.
on the right thing. Okay. The flax style or Flax Sweater by Tin Can Knits is a fantastic free sweater that is written for, I don't think it's at 4 yarn weights and every size from baby to mega Mega Man. And it is a free resource, and they have got scads of tutorials. They are as tutorial happy as I am. So if for your first sweater, if you'd like it to be a top-down seamless raglan, I would do the flax. They have a little bit of like garter stitch across the top of the shoulder and down the sleeve, which you can just not knit if you'd rather not have that detail. That's it. It's a fantastic one. And for your first sweater, often like doing a baby sweater is a really fun, like, this is totally doable. And it only took me a skein or 2 of yarn and like a couple weeks if you are nervous, but honestly, don't be. Like, if you can knit a gnome, you can knit a sweater. Like, nothing a sweater is going to throw at you is going to be like some of the stuff I throw at you guys with gnomes. Like,
I'm more nervous that it just wouldn't fit after spending all
Yeah.
that time and the money on yarn and everything. So it's not like sewing where you can make alterations to it.
Yeah, but it's also not like sewing because you don't cut your material.
Well, that's true.
And then with top-down sweaters, you get to try them on as you go, right? Like, you finish the yoke, knit an inch, and put it on waste yarn or extra needles and try it on, and you will know, oh wait, that is way too tight in my armpits or whatever. And then just write in the forums and people will help you problem solve that problem. That's a fix that everybody, well, not everybody, but lots of us can help you fix that if you're discovering it midway. You can do it.
And a gauge swatch, man.
I
That's
know.
why I knit shawls and gnomes.
The best gauge swatch is actually a hat. If that makes you feel any better, buy enough, knit a hat for a toddler and give it away. And then before you give it away, make sure you measure it before and after you block it. And just write those in your, and then, yeah, you can have a Christmas gift / birthday gift if you don't want to do it right now. And it's a swatch, because the bigger your swatch, the better. You're more likely to be relaxed and not trying to rush and be all like, and it's in the round, just like the sweater would be. Yeah, the best swatch is a hat, frankly.
That's a good idea, because I always just feel like I'm wasting time. I know I'm not wasting time, but that's what it feels like.
It does. It feels like the stupid thing you have to do before you're allowed to have fun.
Yeah.
As opposed to the really clever thing you're doing to make sure your fun has a functional product at the end.
Yes.
Right?
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. It looks like you guys are just being really kind in the comments. So thank you for that. And I appreciate everyone choosing me and my patterns to spend their free time with, as well as spending time with me on the weekends. Thank you so much for being you, and I can't wait to see you next month, where we just get to hang out and knit and maybe talk a little bit about what's coming for the December gnome. It's coming so soon. Oh, I'm so excited.
I'm excited too.
Yeah.
I can't wait.
I have to
Thank you.
decide if one recipe needs cayenne pepper. We'll see. Have a great weekend, everybody. Bye.